All right, we're back and we want to get into our discussion this morning, taking a look at some of the big stories of the week. And what a week it has been. Just a couple of days, actually 2 days ago or so, the Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan was in the country. She ended that visit to Kenya on a high, lots of memorable moments, and we'll be talking about that and hearing what some of the memorable moments were from my guests who are here with us in studio. But also, we know a lot of activity in Parliament yesterday, lawmakers giving the BBI bill a clean bill of health, so to speak, with an overwhelming vote in support of the First Amendment. I'll also be hearing from my guests on the same as well. But I want to hear from you on both that state visit. What was your takeaway from that? But in addition, Parliament yesterday, we haven't seen them gather as many as they did yesterday. I'm not sure about whether they followed COVID-19 protocols, but also they stayed quite late discussing that. And some Kenyans said they should have stayed up late discussing other matters. We'll hear from you on that. 22422 is the SMS line, and the hashtag is Daybreak. Here in studio, Lydia Madhia, who's an advisor, Ministry of Public Service, here with us. Thanks for finding time for us. And also in studio, we have Moses Kilonzo, the chair of the Persons with Disabilities Lower Eastern Region. Joining us virtually shortly will be Nerima Wako, who is the executive director of Siasa Place. But Lydia, let me start with you, and thanks for joining us this morning. Your most memorable moments from Suluhu's visit. I know a lot happened, but what do you think?
I think for me, the most memorable thing was her speech in Parliament. It had the right, quantities of everything: charm, humor, substance, poetry. If you, in fact, you try to translate her speech into English, you realize it's really, really well written. And the way she delivered it, very, well paced, very sort of authentic, conversational. I think for me, that speech will stick with me for a long time.
What does it have, what does it do for you and maybe for women across the country, across the region, to have a lady like her leading Tanzania? Bearing in mind, I know we have some would say a ceremonial president in Ethiopia, but nevertheless, what sort of inspiration does she provide for women in the region, and what sort of lessons does she provide as well, as you observed her two-day state visit?
I mean, if you think about the importance of representation, that when you see yourself somewhere, then you're like, oh, I could also be that or do that. When boys see you here, they're like, I think I want to be like Wahiga. I like how he looks, I like how he talks, what he does. And so it's that sense of representation that we have a local East African example of a woman president. And so young girls can feel that their dreams are really valid, because now here is a real life person who is president. And I think what you draw from her history is that consistency in the party. She's been very loyal. She's served in very many capacities, quietly behind the scenes. I think one of the important things to remember is that when Magufuli was grounding himself in Tanzania, it is Suluhu who was going around doing diplomatic outreach and all those kinds of things. So you see that that consistency is rewarding, and that if you really stick to a cause and you decide that this is my line of work or my line of service, it will pan out. But there's one little, I think, thing I've seen people talk about, her demeanor. That poise, that calm, soft energy that is completely contradictory to what Magufuli was. And it's very stereotypical Wahiga, because women who have a different energy, assertive, are deemed aggressive, and are not very likable. And you can see the reception that she's received is very positive, because she conveys those stereotypical feminine traits that people feel comfortable with. And so I think there we have to then study and see, is it better then for women? Is it easier to rise to that level when that is the kind of sort of like disposition that you showcase? Because you've seen, for instance, reception of people like Hillary, who are a lot more, sort of different energy. Then the reception is very vile, and people don't like her. She screeches, she talks too much, or this and that. So I think we have to really see that there's still that stereotyping of women and female leadership. That
you've raised a very interesting point, and Moses, I'm coming to you shortly to get your views on that state visit. But for you then, and there are those online who felt this week that it's still not enough. That East Africa, we are still not doing well. Access to education, access to leadership, still a challenge across the region. Even for a woman to get to the ballot as a presidential candidate in this country. I mean, when you look at the number of times the papers have profiled potential candidates for 2022, you rarely see a woman. So are we doing well, or in your view, you know, the Tanzanian people just got lucky, you know? How would you term it?
They are very lucky that they had a woman right there, because if she wasn't right there, it would have been another man. And I think you remember just when Magufuli's situation was a bit, people are not very sure, there was talk of people trying to just and push her to the side. You know, she was just perfectly positioned for nobody, you know, nobody could be able to really change the trend or the course of history, and she really had to occupy that position. But if she hadn't been that strategically placed, I don't think we would have seen a female president in East Africa. So we have a long, long way to go. And Mahiga, like you're saying, even if you look at the newspapers today, you see Daily Nation here, has profiled an avalanche of men about...
you call it an avalanche of men.
and there's only one woman, as if the conversation yesterday was exclusively, you know, done by men. We have a long way to go. But I think the media also has been a bit insensitive
I was waiting for you to get to that.
For me to come at you. I think you guys need to help us so that women get as much coverage. We're not even saying we want more coverage, as much coverage as men for the efforts that they make. A man will walk on the streets and say a random thing and there'll be headline news. A woman will be doing Kikotek, you know, in you know, Kitui, and hardly get a mention, right? So I think the media needs to be a little bit more attuned to frontline and position some of these prominent women leaders so that we can see more of them, and that way we'll begin to normalize their leadership and their, you know, their legitimacy in the leadership space.
I'm sure Moses Kilonzo also will have a thing or two to say about what better work the media can do, especially to profile, you know, sort of, and give publicity to marginalized communities. Moses, thanks for finding time to join us this morning. And let me get your thoughts straight off that state visit by President Suluhu. What did you make of it?
Thanks for having me. So first, I should say Tanzania is very lucky for having Samia Suluhu, because one, when I listened to her speech, actually it is one of the best speeches I've ever heard from an East African president. Now, listening to Samia, I felt like I was listening to my Fasihi teacher, because of the Swahili and all that, and she said she is teaching our MPs and senators Swahili. But all that aside, Samia Suluhu is the way she brings out her charisma is different from the other leaders, because the way she talks, she sounds humble. And when you look at, when you listen to her, the way she puts across her points, she's very, very, very eloquent and very clear on what she wants and what she's driving at. So I would say our leaders should first learn from Samia Suluhu, because she is one leader who Tanzania is very lucky to be having.
Moses, what do you make of what Lydia had to say, that as a woman, when she sees another woman rising to that particular position, it inspires her? And for you, who's the chairman of Persons with Disabilities Lower Eastern, talk to me about that inspiration that is needed, and why, as we talk about BBI, or whether it's about the next election or leadership, how important it is to ensure that we have people representative of all groups are rising to positions of leadership, and how important that is in inspiring others.
Yeah, so first, the problem in our country has always been us and the leaders. Because when you tell me, take for instance, even our legislation has been already marginalizing people. Because when you tell me you're putting, for instance, 30% for youth, women and persons living with disabilities, and living, so you're saying 70% is for who? For men, right? So that legislation by itself right there marginalizes people, because youths are 75% of Kenyan population. Plus women, according to the last census, women are are many than men, and plus persons
something plus 50, and I'm sure Lydia knows better than me on this, but yes, yes, yeah. I believe your numbers are accurate.
And plus persons with disabilities, and then you legislate and give them 30%. That lot, you give it that percent, and then leave the 70%. So I think our leaders need to relook into how they have been conducting business in the house, and also the media. The media, Lydia alluded to the media not being in forefront in championing matters women. But I'll like to differ a bit, because, you know, matters politics. When we say you're involved in politics, politics of this country, Kenya, they are brought, or rather they depend on two things. So one is popularity, and second is wealth. And that's a fact, because if you have to popularize yourself, you have to move across maybe the whole country, maybe meeting people, and that requires some considerable amount of money. So when we look at our women in Kenya, now how many are capable of that? And how many are capable of canvassing the whole country and talking to people and bringing this viral effect that the media can detect and see something to write or report on. So I don't think the media has been biased. I just think the women they want the media to, you know, there's this girl child thing that was started, I think, some years ago, and it disabled our women in a way that they felt that everything should go that way, that they should be given privileges, they should be given a upper hand than all the other people.
I don't think it's about privileges. I think it's about just catching up. You know, statistics shows that it will take women, I think, and I think a survey was done on this, 150 years to catch up in terms of access to education alone, for example. I think it's a little bit unfair to say that they want privileges when all they want is an equal share. Just like I'm sure the community you represent as the chairman of persons with disabilities also want an equal share to the national cake, whether it's access to education and so forth.
Of course, but...
Is that not what they ask you when you meet? You know, we also want those seats, we also want those tenders.
Yes.
Not privileges, Bwana Moses.
When I said privileges,
yes.
This is exactly what I meant. That they want to be like sort of favored, because they feel they have that inferiority complex that was instilled in them from way back, looking at our history and our African culture and all that. So when a woman sees a man and they are doing exactly the same thing, and maybe you give them an equal chance, and maybe the man shines, or rather does it better than the woman will start complaining. And this mentality...
You have a very controversial perspective, Moses. Lydia, let me allow Lydia to respond. I'm sure she might not fully agree with you on that.
I feel so triggered. I don't even know where to start. Because he says it very right, that there is a sense of an esteem issue, especially in leadership. When you see, you know, women trying to come up for leadership, they already start at a disadvantage because they have not been taught that they can lead. Actually, studies show that when girls are growing up, it's highly unlikely that anybody in the family, the parents, the relatives, anybody told them that you can lead or go lead. But boys automatically, from the very early age, are given these opportunities even to lead in the homestead, to lead in funeral arrangements, to lead in this and the other, but it's never the same for girls. Girls are almost taught to take sort of like a backseat supportive homemaking role. And so it takes a lot of re-engineering of an individual as they grow up to begin to think, oh, even me as a woman, I can actually lead. And I think it will take now perhaps our generation, and I'm sure, I don't know whether you are a parent to girls, and you begin to see girls now becoming a lot more confident. And it starts with that confidence that I can lead, and with the examples we're seeing of people like Suluhu. And to that same point, Wahiga, the lived experience of women is so different from the lived experience of men. Women do not encounter an equal world when they wake up in the morning. It's not the same way that a man will just wake up and everything is okay. We will be in a meeting, Wahiga, even in public service, I can tell you. I will be in a boardroom and I'll make a point. And people will be like, okay, move, and then another man will make the same exact point that I made. But the man will be credited for the idea. And everybody will forget that I had actually spoken about the exact same thing. There's a cultural problem in terms of how we see women in this country, in Africa in general. And the place of women is not yet equal. And that is why we call for affirmative action. What affirmative action does is it tries to pull people up so that we can be at the same place with each other. For instance, like how we do in Northeastern, right? Where they didn't have access to a lot of these services and infrastructure, and we're trying to say, okay, we'll do affirmative action for you to get into public service, we'll do affirmative action for you to be able to get more resources through the county revenue allocation, we'll do equalization fund. So it's the same thing with women. It's not that they want a favorable treatment. In fact, women have to work almost 10 times as hard to get 1% of the glory that men get for doing very little. Even in raising children, for instance, a man will just show up at the birthday for 3 minutes, or show up, you know, once a year at Parents' Day, and people are like, oh, that's such a present parent. But the mother has been washing those children every day, cleaning them, taking them to. Nobody will say good job. Everybody will just be assuming, oh, but that's your job. So I think my friend needs to read a little bit more, or you know, get in touch with the element of affirmative action. Women do not want favors. We do not want to be more than men. We just want to be equal human beings in this society.
And of course, this was all triggered sort of this week by that state visit by Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan that ended on a high note, but of course opened the question about women in leadership, what gains have been made, but also the challenges as well. And I want to bring in Nerima Wako, who joins us virtually. She's the Executive Director of Siasa Place. Nerima, many thanks for finding time for us this morning. And I also want to begin by hearing from you your key takeaways from that state visit.
Well, for me, as already been mentioned by Lydia, good to see you. It's been mainly very joyous. I think it's something that...
Okay, Nerima, there seems to be a challenge with your sound. I'm not sure what is the issue. Can you hear me? Okay, okay, let's see. Maybe let's just try again. Okay, I think we have a challenge with that, so we will see if we can get her back on and get that. Okay, yeah, definitely have a challenge. So we're just going to have to leave her on that for now. Engineer Lazaro Kanyambok says, we are not too far from Tanzania. We have the first woman Chief Justice, at least in terms of nomination, a woman heading one of the most important arms of the government, the judiciary. And of course, you can weigh in. 22422 is the SMS line. Hashtag is Daybreak. We're going to sort out our technical challenges and we'll be right back with so much more of that. What I must say is a very engaging discussion on the other side of this break. You're watching Daybreak. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for staying with us. As I mentioned earlier, we'll talk a little bit about that state visit by President Samia Suluhu and also the BBI as well. We hadn't managed to finish our first discussion. We were trying to get Nerima Wako on the line, and we do have her now. She's the Executive Director, Siasa Place. Good morning, Nerima, and I can give you a chance now to give your thoughts on that visit by, the two-day state visit by President Samia Suluhu Hassan.
Good morning, everyone. Good to be here. Good to see you, Lydia, Waiga. So for me, it was such a breath of fresh air to be able to see President Suluhu with so much power and so much grace. And I have to agree with what Lydia talked about in terms of even the fact that on media, but even before I get into that, it's just to say, I think that we're turning a new leaf to be able to have engagements and talk about perhaps business opportunities between our two countries. We know that we haven't had the best sort of relationship, and there's an opportunity to be able to mend that. As much as when she arrived into the country, she was wearing her mask throughout, but even though when she entered Tanzania, when she was leaving Tanzania, she hadn't worn a mask. It's just to show that she respects, you know, what her country believes, and she also respects what our country believes. And that for me is a power of diplomacy and negotiation. But the media does cover women differently. Unfortunately, a lot of the pieces were either talking about her fashion, they were talking about the number of bodyguards that she had that were women, and perhaps it's fascinating because we haven't seen that before, but we lose sight, we lose focus of the content of what she's bringing, and it's sexist. And another thing that I also recognized was when Angela Merkel was actually retiring, a lot of the conversation was based on her living in the same apartment, her doing her laundry. That was what was trending, not about the policies or the fact that she was able to remain in a very high-level seat in a developed country for such a long time. So women are covered differently in the media, and when they are covered, it's on different issues, not the same as men. And that's something that a lot of our generation is fighting to change, and I believe that it's going to be a very great future if we continue in that trajectory.
Let me then ask you this, Nerima. What do you wish should have been sort of the key takeaways of that visit that may have been covered but not to the kind of extent you'd have wanted to see or hear?
Her expertise, this is something that she's been doing for a long time as the vice president previously. Traveling, international travel, being able to negotiate, her power in diplomacy, just seeing that and what she's bringing to the table, I think is more important rather than what she's wearing or who's surrounding her and how is she different and how is she going to deliver a speech. Of course, she knows how to deliver a speech. She was the vice president, for goodness sake. So these are some of the conversations that we tend to lose focus on, focusing on the content and the role of her office and the things that she's willing to change. We should even talk about how she's going to combat COVID in Tanzania. How is she doing it differently? And what's that going to take? Is it going to be obstacles, changing a narrative? How is she going to do that sensitively and not necessarily negating what her predecessor had done? So those are some of the challenges that I think that she's going to face as the leader of Tanzania. But we are so focused on other things that are non-essential.
Okay, you raise an interesting point which I want to bring Moses Kilonzo in on. Moses, as the chair of the Persons with Disabilities Lower Eastern, how do you know what focus do you wish maybe the media or generally society had in terms of persons with disabilities? What do you wish was the narrative that would come out? Nerima says clearly, as a woman, she feels that the discussion around Suluhu could have gone differently. But for you, as the chair of persons with disabilities, whenever issues of persons with disabilities come up, what do you wish was focused on more?
First of all, the media has not been keen in reporting matters persons with disabilities. So first, I'd like to see the media highlight, like the life of a person with disability, because if everyone knows, for instance, that this is the life of a person with disability, this is what they go through when they wake up in the morning, they start here, they go here, 1, 2, 3, till the end of the day. Everybody now will start seeing the challenges, but just imagining without knowing what you're imagining that being a PWD is a challenge and you don't know what you're imagining, then it can't actually, it can't help. So first of all, as persons living with disabilities, we would like to see the media trying to show people that, for instance, when you invited here, me here, Waiga, coming from home up to here, I needed a guide. I needed someone to hold my hand to come here. Coming into this studio, I needed somebody to assist me to get here. Unlike all my other friends who have sight, they'll come and get into the studio on their own. So unless, it's one thing to be told, for example, that to be told a story like Jesus Christ was crucified, and it's another thing to be crucified yourself, or to witness somebody being crucified. So if the media could highlight the challenges faced by persons with disabilities, it could be the first milestone towards persons with disabilities being receiving the help that they need. And again, I must also point out that the representatives for persons with disabilities in our Assembly and Senate have not been doing enough to champion matters, PWDs, through legislation and representation. It has not been enough. I expected to see them come out, articulate issues, show people that persons with disabilities can articulate issues. Persons with disabilities can also plan for people and not sit back and wait to be planned for. So those are the things that I feel have not been highlighted about persons with disabilities.
Okay, I was going to ask you at the end, what would you have wanted to hear more from your representatives in Parliament, but you've tackled that towards the very end. Lydia has been agreeing quite a bit with what you and Nerima had to say. I can give her a chance to respond, but Moses has taken us to Parliament, and I do want to transition to BBI at some point, but first, I don't know if you have any reaction to what the other two guests have said.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Nerima is a good friend of mine, so we will tend to agree a lot. I think we share the same values and views, especially on this issue of gender equality. And certainly I'd agree with Moses. I believe that stories are powerful, and representation, like I mentioned earlier, is also very powerful. So if, like he's saying, you're able to really see what it is like for a person in Nairobi, for instance, to wake up in the morning and go to work disabled and go back home, you know, and really begin to see how it is that they actually live their life, how they interact with the transport industry, how they interact with the eateries, how they interact with life in general, then it would give a better picture of people in terms of their welfare. I also, just the other day, paid a visit to the National Council for Persons Living with Disability, and they are facing a lot of challenges because they are not able to really keep up with their clientele, because their processes are very manual. So you can imagine if you are disabled somewhere in Kajiado and you have to travel all the way to Westlands to come just to get your disability card or any services that you need at the from the agency, you have to travel physically. And I think one of the things that we will begin to see is perhaps government intervening with that council to try and automate their processes, try to bring technology closer, because I think of all of us who might need the ease of technology, persons with disability need it even more than the rest of us. And I think hopefully if the minister is able to pick that up, the Minister of ICT, he could be able to then change the fortunes for PWDs. I don't know if you want us to go immediately into BBI.
We can go into BBI. We know that yesterday lawmakers gave the BBI a clean bill of health with an overwhelming vote in support of the First Amendment. But immediately, if you went onto social media, a section of Kenyans were of the opinion, and let me read a tweet. It was actually, okay, he's called, what a name. I won't even say this name on air. But basically he said, I've never seen members of parliament showing up in large numbers to vote on a bill that directly affects the regular mwananchi. When it comes to a bill that supports their personal interests, they show up in crowds. They don't even care about their own health in what some were worried might become a super spreader event. We saw almost 200 members of parliament gathered in the House yesterday till very late in the evening. Your thoughts on this and where we are in the BBI process?
To be fair to the legislatures, this is a momentous occasion. This is a change of the constitution. So it is incomparable with really anything else. You cannot even compare it with any other legislation or any other law, because what this does is fundamentally change how we will govern ourselves and any other laws that accrue from the constitution. So I wouldn't be too harsh on them in terms of how they showed up. And I think the fact that they actually showed up and they have been having a robust debate about this change of the constitution, and they've had it, I think, for a month plus. I think that's to say that they take it seriously, they don't take it casually, and we should not expect them to take it any less seriously than they did. And I think it's commendable for them to have dedicated the amount of time that they did on the matter. In terms of the fate of, the place of where BBI is right now, it's in a good place. I think we had some challenges a few weeks back. Actually,
speaking of challenges, hold on. And Nerima, I'm also coming to you. I'm sure you have something to say on this. ODM seems to have been suffering a little bit this week with what seems to be splits along. Is it 2022? Is it BBI? One can't quite tell. But some interesting sound bites. One from James Orengo and the other one, oh, okay. I'm told we don't have them right now. We'll play them a bit later on. But you've seen the back and forth in ODM, where on one hand you see Otiende Amolo saying something about one group is about BBI, the other group is about 2022. Politics and how it's interfering with a constitutional amendment and causing some to question the honesty of the constitutional amendment, that doesn't concern you, as it does some?
No, not really, Wahiga, because it was always going to be a dicey balance for the principals to separate BBI from 2022, especially the closer it has come to the next election. If we had been able to do the referendum, say, during the first year of the handshake, perhaps, if we had been able to execute it and finish with it, then it would have made sense. But I think the president was hesitant to sponsor a public political process of that nature too early on in his term. And so he was always trying to push the referendum a little further into his term so that he can be able to get some of the work of delivery done. And now we are at that point when it's very difficult for Higa to separate those two things, because now people want to use the BBI to pivot their careers, their political visibility, their political alignments, and those kinds of things. And you cannot do away with either. What is fundamentally important to remember is that there was nothing about the 2022 candidature or prospects for people that had been discussed when the handshake was done. I think that has been very, very clear from both the president and the former prime minister. There were assumptions, of course, within the ODM camp that, you know what, this project, if we carry this project, it could portend for us certain political dividends if we are able to use it to profile our candidate, to profile ourselves, to lead, to stay in the limelight, and which they have.
And you're not speaking on behalf of ODM. This is your personal.
No, this is my personal
view.
Okay, this is me analyzing the situation and seeing that this is the collateral they had hoped to retrieve. And surely, I don't think they can say they have not retrieved some political collateral, because they have managed to stay center stage of politics in Kenya for the last 3 years, even though they were actually defeated in 2017 and should be lying low like an envelope. But they've been able to stay, top of mind with all of us. Raila has been able to stay top of mind just because of leading this BBI and handshake process. And so in terms of harvesting political collateral, I think they have done that. And to expect to harvest more than that, I think would be pushing the envelope, because the president is not able to commit beyond that, because what the agreement was, let's reform Kenya, let's put a jurisprudence that is able to have inclusivity, and then after that we will see. But right now I think there are people who are in the ODM camp who are a bit impatient and a little bit ungrateful, I would say, of of the limelight and the privilege of access and visibility that they have enjoyed.
Let's listen to a little bit of what was said this weekend by some leaders within the ODM party. Then I get a reaction from Nerima, get her thoughts on what happened yesterday. Parliament up late discussing that BBI bill. Let's listen to first Rarieda MP Otiende Amolo.
Unfortunately, on our side, there are also people who are now focused only on the BBI and the handshake and benefits they get in these circumstances of cooperation, and have lost sight of our goal in terms of Raila becoming president. And some of them have therefore become merchants. And that is the truth.
Have your own self-worth. And me, I can never be intimidated in my political life. Can never be intimidated. Because I've seen many people come and go. I've seen many powerful people come and go. I've seen presidents come here and go. I have seen people who, on their word, you would leave this house and you'll be locked in the same day. They have come and gone. I have seen very respected women in this country like Grace Onyango, who was in the committee for the special investigations relating to the disappearance of JM. Yeah. And that made me very proud, because those days there were very few women. And she stood firm. She was required to change a report of the National Assembly. And she stood firm. So I want to plead with you. I want to plead with you. We got a heavy task. And if people out there feel you can be intimidated and you've been brought to this house with all the powers that we have, including the trial of a governor, imagine next time that you may have a motion for the trial of the president. Will you be intimidated? So I urge you, for the future of this country, in the performance of your constitutional duties never be intimidated.
Nerima, a lot of politics, and yet this is a bill that will finally be presented to the people, and some people may be saying this morning, we are confused on the intentions, we are confused on what's happening behind the scenes. What do you make of it?
I agree. It wasn't very clear to begin with, but also the fact that even the gender bill failed about 6-7 times, we were never able to get 2/3. And yesterday, historically, we were able to get over 233. That has never happened in the history of this country. And to even think that they were there until 11 p.m., you know, it can show you that these guys, by the way, they can work, even during a pandemic. So it's concerning, but even listening to Honorable Tiende Omolo is basically talking about, you know, short-term goals. And I agree with him, because you may be in the light right now, but you can only remain under the sun for a very short period of time. Not everybody can remain under the sun forever. And he's thinking about the future. And so is Honorable Kim, because when we talk about intimidation, it's been there. If you did not agree with it, we have seen people being put out of committees. We have seen the strictness and the whipping that has been involved in putting people in place. As much as you can talk about it being party politics, what we're seeing is dissenting voices being muted. You're being told you do not have any right to have a different opinion. Everybody is going in this particular direction, and if you object to that, you will lose your position. So, I mean, it's just a reminder that this is something that has happened in our history before. It's not the first time. And I believe that James Orengo wants to be on the right side of history to say that, you know what, I took a stance, and I want that stance to be visible. And like I always say, that all politics is local politics, because right now, publicly, a lot of people are saying that the economy is very difficult, it's terrible, they're struggling, high cost of living. So you don't want to be seen to be too removed from the individual who brought you into that position of power. You have to also relate to them and also demonstrate that you're in a tight corner, and also doing the best that you can, considering the party politics and the politics in the country with this BBI.
Okay. We missed a little bit of your sound there, Nerima, but I did catch generally, you know, most of your point. Moses, we expect that if Senate follows the National Assembly, BBI bill passes, and then now it's to the people. And it's those who are for BBI to come and popularize it with the people, and those who are against BBI to go and tell the people why they should not vote for the bill at the referendum. My question to you is, in terms of public participation, in terms of getting the message out, what do you hope to hear? What sort of questions do you hope will be answered? What are sort of the concerns, maybe first of the community you represent, persons with disabilities, Lower Eastern, and what you've been hearing about, what you'd like to hear in that public participation that will help Kenyans to fully know all the details, you know, with a referendum coming soon from what it appears?
Before I come to your question, allow me to cite one or two things about BBI. So first, politics of deceit and conmanship have been characterizing our political arena. First of all, BBI, or rather handshake, was sold as a panacea to the convoluted post-election skirmishes and dirty politics, negative ethnicity. But somewhere along the road, it turned out to be a Kieleweke versus Tanga thing, and then a handshake, these people versus this. And then down the line, where the 9 points agenda went, I don't know, because first of all, BBI was to be a solution to one, post-election violence, and whatever they are bringing on board to say this and this will bring an end to post-election violence is, for instance, the return of the post of a leader of opposition. So in 2007, there was a leader of opposition, but we all know how it went down. So you telling me that the leader of opposition post will bring an end to post-election violence, you're actually lying to me. But to your question, Wahiga, what I'd like to hear from the BBI crusaders when they come to common mwananchi, first, I'd like them to explain to us. The BBI is amending Article 154, 155, 156, for instance, about the appointment of CSS and PSS, that they should not be, they will not be vetted by Parliament, they will be directly appointed by the President. But it's not amending Article 132, for instance, which says, I think B, which says that the President shall appoint the CSs and the PSs after the Parliament has approved, with the approval of the National Assembly. So when you look at that, you ask yourself, if BBI passes and we amend that, now the Okia or Mutata of this age will run to our courts, and maybe after the President has appointed his cabinet, and go to the courts and say, pursuant to Article 132, these people are in office illegally. And so those are the fundamental things that I want to be hearing. I don't want to be hearing that this is about Kieleweke and Tangatanga, the train has taken off, you need to join the train, and the chest thumping and all that. I need to see them articulate issues. I need to see them give mwananchi all these BBI materials to read and see through what exactly is contained in BBI for mwananchi to make an informed decision.
Have you yourself, how closely have you been able to interact with the bill, personally?
Personally, I've gone through the bill,
okay,
because I have a smartphone, luckily. I know not many persons with disabilities have that. So I went through the bill and cited some gray areas.
Okay, I see. Thank you. Lydia, I'm sure has also had a chance to go through the bill closely. You hear his concerns. And in terms of the next step of public participation, what do you want to see done? Because there are a lot of questions, some valid, some maybe based off rumors that many Kenyans would have.
I think the ultimate goal, of the sponsors would be that people understand the bill as it is, and not the propaganda that has been there. There are a lot of misconceptions, including people who went out of their way to create fake documents that had nothing to do with the mother document. And when you go to the village, Mohiga, you encounter those funny documents, written funny things about many things. So you will, I think, if we are able to achieve that factual awareness of every single individual, to have that, every adult who is eligible to vote on it, to have the factual information, and then they can make an informed decision. I think that would be the ideal scenario. And so the closer we get to 100% awareness, the better, I think, for the sponsors, because Wahiga, I have not encountered anybody who, once you sit down with them and explain every single clause, no matter how opposed they were to the BBI, I have not encountered one person whose mind has not been changed once you explain the facts and figures of the BBI report. People like myself, and this is a comment I wanted to make about this issue of Orengo. These are people who are being very disingenuous because they have been part of the process. They knew about the 70 seats, which is what had been causing contention in the House. All these things were negotiated way in advance, and all those matters were settled. So for people like Orengo to come and begin to bring issues because they want some constituencies allocated in other places, and it was very clear how the formula had been applied, so that the regions such as Roiro and a lot of Central and Western, where numbers of representation had been so off, yeah, there are people whose vote is more superior than others. But everybody's vote in this country should be equal. And so the people, and you introduced me earlier as a founder of Daughters of the Mountain. For us, it is very, very clear. If this BBI is about anything for us, it is about one man, one vote, and 1 man 1 shilling. Because for some strange reason, about a decade ago, our leaders accepted an inferior position where Mount Kenya gets less resources, Mount Kenya is less represented, and we are actually correcting a historical error. We're not even asking for reparations because they should give us backdated CDF, yeah, for all those misrepresentation numbers that we had. And so going forward, Wahiga, in terms of this bill, we will now really encounter, if there is a no team, they will have to come out clearly and persuade people not to vote. I think there's a group, the civil society group that is led by Kina Martha Karua and Daisy Amdani. That group perhaps will begin to see them now really come out and tell people, you know, do not vote for this bill for this and these reasons. And then there will be, of course, those ones who will be persuading people. But what we are going to see is not a very polite engagement as we have seen so far. Because so far there has not been a proper competition about, you know, vote or don't vote. It's been about awareness. It's been about, oh, let's go through the stages. But where we are headed, it's now do or die. It's a yes or it's a no. Someone has to win and someone has to lose.
You know, it's do or die in the middle of a pandemic, but that's a story for another day. Before we take that break, Lydia, you said you've not met someone who you haven't laid the facts and figures about BBI on and convinced them. Before we take that break, Nerima Wako is on the line. In the beginning, when she made her opening statement, you could see she's not very clear on her stand on BBI. Nerima, I hope I've not misquoted you on that.
You only persuade her online.
If that is the case, Lydia, convince her. What are the facts and figures of BBI this morning that we should make Nerima, you know, back it as strongly as you do?
I know Nerima's heart is with the 2/3 gender rule, and I can assure her that that elusive 2/3 threshold that we have not had in Parliament will finally be secured in BBI. And not only will we get the numbers, first of all, we'll have parity in the Senate in terms of men and women. We will then have 2/3 in the National Assembly, and we will have meaningfulness of representation because nobody will be nominated unless they have actually gone all the way to the IBC ballot and demonstrated capacity for leadership.
Nerima, I need to take a break, but I need to give you a chance to respond. Is that already something?
You know, it sounds very nice. Lydia, it sounds so good. But
it is so good.
My concern is the implementation part. I'm just wondering how we will be able to achieve that with the same people. It just does not make sense to me, but also the fact that the things that you're talking about, there are also a number of things within the document that I believe are great for the country, but I'm just wondering if it should go through a whole referendum to be able to be implemented. I just think as a country we could have just evaluated our constitution itself, seen the gaps, gone through a review, and then, you know, just properly done and be able to make the changes that we need to make. Because I don't think the constitution is perfect in itself. It has gaps, including even looking at the Senate, not having budgetary allocation. There are changes that need to be made, and even much more going to the counties. I agree on that. But whether we needed to go through a referendum and to make such changes, to me, is where I have a problem with the whole thing. I don't think there's need for such drastic changes of constitution.
Nerima, I'll give you a bit more time after the break just to lay out what would convince you then in that case, because you've given some of your concerns there. Let's take that break. When we come back, I'll give Nerima a chance. Moses was also weighing in on this. And what are your thoughts? 22422 is the SMS line. #Daybreak. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for staying with us. I know I don't have too much time, but let me see if I can get some more nuggets from each of my guests. Nerima, I think before the break, you had raised your concerns with the BBI process. One, you had stated, must it be a referendum? A lot of these changes could have happened without a referendum. As you can see, it was in regards to the 2/3 gender rule. You already said the meeting of Parliament yesterday showed that where there is political will, there is a way. But secondly, I think you also said you're concerned that the same political class may not be as genuine in implementing the BBI to the letter if it's been a struggle to implement the 2010 Constitution to the letter. If I've misquoted you, feel free to correct me.
Correct. That's exactly what I mean. Because even within the BBI document at the moment, they talk about the 50-50 representation, right? They talk about having one nominee to be a woman in the Council of Governors, in the Commission for Revenue Allocation. They talk about it in the governor, the deputy, one must be a woman of not the same gender, or even political parties. They talk about 2/3. But these are things, even in our own constitution, you know, which we were trying to push for within the representation of 2/3, that has flopped 6 times. So even if you have this in a document, you know, even when we're talking about pushing for women's representation. It will be there, but it doesn't mean that they have to follow it. So that's, for me, it's twice beaten. I don't need, I'm shy. I'm shy now because I have learned, and now I'm just not going to listen because I'm not understanding how, with that particular document, you're living in an unconstitutional parliament, but then now you're saying we're going to be able to follow this to the letter because it is the BBI. That doesn't make sense to me.
Moses, what are your thoughts? You've stated what you want to hear in terms of a debate moving forward. Do you share any of the concerns or thoughts from either Lydia or Nerima?
Yeah, first, let me say BBI has always and will always be about 2022. And
some would disagree with you on that.
They are at liberty to disagree because they have their own reasons for that. But I also have my own reasons why I'm saying that. Because first of all, when you look at BBI, we are being told it's a popular initiative. Now, what is a popular initiative? When you see the state popularizing, or rather the state sending people to popularize BBI, you tend to wonder, is this a popular initiative? And again, Wahiga, I must point out some few things in the BBI which have concerned me. One is the issue about persons living with disabilities in the Senate. It has been scrapped off. So you tend to wonder, and you know Senate oversees or oversights the counties. You tend to wonder how then will the interests of persons with disabilities be represented in the Senate, because there was a reason as to why the representation was there. The drafters of the 2010 Constitution could have as well said that we don't need any PWD in the Senate, but they saw it important for them to be there. So you get to wonder what the BBI task force was thinking of, not including PWDs in there, and it is very shameful for people to just think that persons with disabilities in the Senate are of insignificant use, because the fact that those who have been there have not been efficient enough does not mean that all persons with disabilities are not efficient. There are people who can go there and represent persons with disabilities very well and legislate very well. So it is a very big concern in the PWD's community.
Lydia, again, you don't sit here representing the BBI task force, for example, but you do hear some of the concerns that both Nerima and Moses have raised. What do you see as some of the key selling points around BBI moving forward? But what do you also see as the challenges? Because every constitutional moment will have those who oppose it, from the 2010 Constitution to this one as well.
And Wahiga, I would like to agree with Nerima and also challenge her. If the concern is implementation, right, of the constitutional paradigm that we will give ourselves, then we have a responsibility to change the leadership so that we get people who can be more faithful. And so this is me challenging Nerima to go and stand for something in 2022, asimame, kiti, achaguliwe, and go be faithful implementing the constitution, so that we are not always bystanding and criticizing leaders without necessarily putting ourselves out there. Let me also say that on the two-thirds gender rule, the mistake that was made in 2010 is that the principle was put in the constitution, yes, but the formula of the how. You know, so you say we are going to do two-thirds and everybody should be two-thirds, but you do not demand, you do not assign a person that responsibility. So for instance, you say cabinet should be two-thirds, but you do not put it in the requirements of a person to be president or in the responsibility of the president to ensure that there is two-thirds in the cabinet. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you leave it hanging. It doesn't have a formula, and it doesn't have an assigned individual person who is supposed to actually execute it. And that is what we are correcting in this BBI. For everything we are saying on gender, there's a formula, and there's a person, there is a body which is supposed to ensure that whatever we are saying is actually executed. Let me also touch on the issue of the disabilities in the Senate. Persons with disabilities, their numbers were compensated. In the National Assembly, there will be 4 nominees. There used to be 2 in the Senate and 2 in the National Assembly. Now there will be 4, so that their numbers are back to where they were in terms of nominees. Noting that the Senate, Wahiga, is the house of equality of the counties, right? It's a house of equality of the counties. So if you nominate anybody, whether it is a woman or it is who, you're going to have one person or two people coming from the same county, because you'll already have 47 counties represented by 1 man and 1 woman. And then if you nominate anybody, that person will come from a particular county, so there'll be 3. And then they will not have a voice, because in the Senate, they don't even vote on issues of, say, budgetary allocation for this or the other. They vote as county delegations. So whoever you nominate is still subsumed in into whichever county they come from. So they do not add much value. But if you go to the National Assembly, that is the house of special interest. That is where you moderate special interest. Now, special interest are PWDs, it's women, it's teachers, it's all these interest groups where you're able to bring in people as nominees, and that is where they can articulate their issues and be able to enforce, for instance, in budgeting and say we need an allocation for PWDs, for vulnerable people, we need social security and this and the other. And that was the philosophy that guided that shift, even moving the women from the 47 seats and putting them in there, because they are elected at the county level, but they have no say in terms of the counties in the National Assembly. And so that was just tidying up that particular issue of representation. Now, in terms of the selling points for BBI, I do believe that the BBI Secretariat has, well, I don't want to say they have failed, but there is something I would challenge them on. The BBI report has 3 kinds of recommendations. There is the recommendations for things that are supposed to go to the referendum. There are recommendations for laws that are supposed to be done at Parliament, which is either amending laws or just legislating new laws. And then there are those administrative things that are supposed to be done through the National Development Committee that is headed by CS Matiang'i. The other 2 items of the BBI report have been dropped completely. And while we were having this debate on the referendum, we could have made progress on the administrative things, for instance, the county ward development, innovation hubs, I think, that were promised to young people. We should have seen that coming up now in the 2021-2022 budget policy statement that Ukuri Atani is going to be reading in a few weeks' time. We should have seen that. We should have seen policy papers coming up on some of those programs that were submitted in the BBI report. We should also have seen the HELB Act amended by now. We should have seen the MSEA Act amended by now. So I think to the extent that they have not been able to carry the legislative and the programmatic aspirations that Kenyans had alluded to, is how we have ended up now in a situation where Kenyans are feeling this BBI was only meant for the political class and the politicians. Because a lot of the things that then benefit us as Mwananchi, as young people, as women, as PWDs, are stuck in the report as legislative and programmatic recommendations. And for me, that if they can find a way to unlock those 2 items, then people will begin to feel, oh, actually this is BBI is for all of us. The referendum is only for only those things that require to be voted upon.
But is time on their side is the question. And as I get final thoughts from each of my guests, I want to hear from them, because each of them represent different groups. Narima, I know you speak on behalf of young people, you speak on behalf of women. As the campaigns begin, and I don't know to what measure, because we're still in the middle of a pandemic and you're seeing what's happening around the world, what major question do you think young people should ask and women should ask those who will come to campaign either for or against the bill? Briefly.
For young people, it's definitely on the economy. Unemployment is just too high, and statistics show that last year 1.7 million people lost their jobs, and that's not even counting women. And for women, of course, it has to be representation. Because of the pandemic, there have been a lot of challenges for women, from gender-based violence to even access to employment and resources and access to education. That are things that are affecting our women today. So those are the things that should be on the table, should be at the forefront when we're discussing the future of this country.
Okay, and Moses, for you, you represent you chair the Persons with Disabilities Lower Eastern Region. What major questions should those within that community ask those who come to campaign either for or against the BBI?
Yeah, before I answer that, allow me to say two things.
Briefly, please, sir.
What Lydia has alluded to. So one, we all know that bills originate either from Senate or National Assembly. So when you tell me that you're taking persons with disabilities to National Assembly and there'll be no any representation in the Senate, you're telling me any bill originating from the Senate, there will be no input from the PWDs. All said and done, it has always been this way with BBI, because I even ask myself, what difference is what is it called, biashara mashinani thing from youth fund, Uwezo fund, women fund? We are creating more funds instead of legislating to just work with what already is in existence. So coming back to your question, what I would like to see and to hear persons with disabilities asking is the question of representation in the Senate and how their interests will be represented in the Senate. The question of representation in the executive, how PWDs will be represented in the executive, and again the question of maybe running mates for governors and president. I felt that BBI should have looked into that and maybe given a legislation on maybe if a governor is not or a president is looking for a running mate, it should be either of the opposite gender or a PWD. Okay. So those are the questions that I would like answered.
Yeah. Lydia, you have the last word in less than a minute. I don't know which way you want to take it.
My interests are three when it comes to BBI. Of course, there's the gender question. So being able to really communicate to women that we finally have a solution to the elusive two-third gender rule, that is something that we would, I think, begin to see the BBI really front as a win for BBI. The second thing for me is young people. We have had a problem getting young people organized, getting young people to speak with one voice, getting their issues streamlined in all sectors and all ministries and parastatals. And I think the issue of the Youth Commission, elevating the agencies of young people into a commission will be one of those things that we'll be talking to young people about. And then, of course, for me, the third thing is the interest of Mount Kenya. One man, one vote, one man, one shilling. That is a key selling point for us who live in the region. And we will be, of course, really honing in on that in terms of being able to persuade the people to vote in favor of the referendum.
Okay, and to our viewers, whatever your views are on this, remember you can weigh in by sending in your SMS via the SMS line 22422, and the hashtag is Daybreak. This is a conversation we'll continue to have online because our time is up in terms of the physical conversation here in studio and virtually as well. Thank you to each of my guests. Nerima Wako, Executive Director, Siasa Place. Here in studio, we've had Moses Kilonzo, the Chair of Persons with Disabilities Lower Eastern, and Lydia Madhia, who is an advisor, Ministry of Public Service. Let me see if I can quickly pick one tweet or two. Let me see what, if I should have probably processed this a little bit earlier. Jenga Kongo Paul says, BBI has brought a new dawn. We had many areas in our Supreme Law that needed to be looked into. There's no area in our society that hasn't been taken care of by BBI. Representation has been the most hit badly, and it's well spelled out in the BBI. That's one person who is very optimistic. Let me see here. But Pandit Olum sees things differently. He says BBI bill in Parliament and the referendum scheme meant to regroup and oil 2022 politics to gain momentum. I am concerned about our representation and I anticipate difficult times ahead. So a lot of convincing, for Kenyans moving forward. Should we now get to a point where it's BBI and the people? And those are some of your thoughts. Hashtag Daybreak, SMS line 22422. Let's take a break. When we come back, it should be DJ T-Boy on the ones and twos, giving you some music to set the stage for the weekend. Stay tuned for that on the other side.